when you have only 10 minutes to talk, it's like speed dating. So therefore, I'll go rapidly. Now, I think my paper is available, so I won't repeat any of it. So please, just take a look at this at some point. In 1977, our Minister of Culture, Nancy Hanks, convened 22 different groups in her conference room. This is our federal Minister of Culture, and it ranged from the Nature Conservancy, the Conservation Foundation, the World Wildlife Fund, the American Association of Museums, the American Council on the Arts, all the design and planning professional societies, and said, I want you to work together, which is not much different than what I've heard today. She said, if you will adopt a term that I think is vague enough that no one knows what it means, livability, it will work because everyone wants a livable community, but no one knows what it means. Thus, you can change the definition depending upon the changing times. On that day, I was then, as a staff member of Nancy's, appointed as the secretariat, and she said, we will fund you to work together, and when I leave, when a new president comes and appoints someone else, I will leave word behind to keep the money going. That money lasted 12 years, and then some new chairman appointed by a new president said, who the hell are these people? Why are they getting so much money? So our funding was completely cut off, but then the banking industry stepped in and said, if you use the term not livable places, but livable communities, which means people first, social equity, people first, we will fund you. So the banking industry, until the collapse of the banking industry, was our funder. And then we discovered the older person was an important asset, and we got funded by groups dealing with the older person and the age wave. So all of this is to say, I have a little bit of experience of team building, of being agile in terms of changing funding base, and my admonition to you is agileness and cooperation are really critical in changing times. The world, the only constant today is change. The age wave, which David Willits called, might be class warfare between the young people helping to support the pensions of us older, growing numbers of older people, has now been renamed in America as the longevity bonus. We're now seeing that the longer life allows society to extract better benefits from an older population. So we've turned that liability into an asset, the longevity bonus. How can we use the longer life of our citizens to benefit our community? Gillian said yesterday from the Financial Times that inequity is the key issue. It is the key issue in the United States. Constantly, funders are saying, Bob, if you focus upon inequity, we will fund you. If you're not, we will forget you. Very simple. Diversity of our population is an asset if you make it. If you treat it as a challenge, you're in real trouble because we're just going to get more and more diverse. The e-world is expanding. If you're not adapting to it, you're going to get left behind. And I hope that you are aware of the street museum done by the Brothers and Sisters firm for the London Museum, which shows images of your streets in London as they aged over the time. And we're going to be seeing more and more virtual heritage, where archaeological sites with an app can be downloaded on your iPad, and you will see what it looked like in its high point before the Titus Arch was lost of the candelabras, the menorahs that were stolen from the temple before they lost their golden color. That's going to be restored as you visit Rome. There's incredible talent in gamers and simulators and game players that are going to be changing the face of archaeology and changing the face of heritage. Resource. What is the largest industry in most of your cities? It's called education and health. We call it EDS and MEDS. If you really want to raise money for heritage, this broad definition, you have to somehow become engaged with the major resources that are percolating in your community, educational resources and healthcare resources. We have found that there are unique ways in which even terrible systems, Washington, D.C., where I live, spends the highest per capita of any school district in America with the lowest outcomes. The lowest outcomes. And yet one magnet school for the performing arts dedicated to Duke Ellington graduates 98% of their students. So why isn't every school an arts magnet school? Most museums are closed on Monday. But the Museum of Modern Art in New York, the Fine Arts Museum in Houston are open Monday because they host Alzheimer patients and caregivers so that they can socialize and somehow, although I don't have dementia, but maybe soon, that we are tranquilized or feel more comfortable in amidst modern art. So they're funded by healthcare foundations to have that money for supporting the caregiver and the Alzheimer patient. How many of your museums or institutions or facilities could fit into that portfolio of caring? There is an interesting relationship that I think that if you were to form that coalition that I similar talked about, where arts and culture and environment and parks and open space and wilderness and wildlife comes together, we adopted the term learned years ago from Michael Middleton of the Civic Trust that these were amenities. And then no one in America knew what amenities were, so we could change that definition. And then we even printed our own T-shirt that said that we were the Amennonites, a new religious order, asked for tax deductibility. So please become the Amennonites, and charge forth with all this working together. If you do relate to that upward mobility agenda, which we heard, if you do struggle to try to help those that need that leg up, whether it's both health and education, remember, people of low means have the lowest educational attainment generally and the highest health problems and the shortest lifespans. Therefore, if you expand their horizons, if you work with them, you will be, in fact, working with, just as we've said, the least advantaged, and they can certainly use your skill, your talent, your hospitality, your neutrality, and the ability of touching people. I cite a study that was done by the Knight Foundation in Miami, Florida. They used to own a network of newspapers, but since no one reads the newspaper in paper anymore, they have foregone their newspapers, but they still support their 20 communities. They hired the Gallup Poll Foundation to interview 43,000 people over 2 years and said, what would it be in your community that would make you want to stay there and work with your fellow neighbors to make it a better place? Amazingly, number one was beauty, both the natural environment and the architectural heritage and the new buildings. Beauty, imagine taking beauty to the bank. Who would have thought that? Second, civic gathering places where people could actually sit, chat, talk, watch children play, and meet newcomers. And then the third one, which was a real shocker, openness to newcomers coming into the community. So therefore, welcoming strangers, immigrants, diverse people is seen as an asset. Then they did an economic analysis of these 20 communities on which ones had the highest ratings on their poll on the beauty, civic gathering place, openness, and compared their economies and found those that scored the highest had the most prosperous economy. So you truly can take these to the bank. So think, do you have those gathering places? They're generally not found on the top of high-rises. They're generally found by historic buildings. They're generally found by parks and settings that are open space. They are uniquely available as a heritage resource that becomes the infrastructure of not only creating civic glue, we call it the glue report, but it is the economic development agenda of your future. It's an infrastructure. We call it the amenity infrastructure. Take quality of life to the bank. You are all in the quality of life business. You're not in the heritage business. You're in the quality of life business. And every rating of every city in the world always begins with what is the quality of life? My own organization has tried to be facile and quick and imaginative, so when our funding on aging unfortunately moved to Asia when MetLife bought a large insurance empire from AIG and found that that was their most profitable division, and they defunded our 10-year program on working with the longevity bonus, we immediately moved into the public health agenda. So what did we bring as an asset having no previous background in public health? We brought you. We said, we're really good at working with arts and cultural groups, botanic gardens, community foundations, community gardens, preservation societies, historical organizations, libraries, museums, parks, performing arts groups, and public markets. So we said, most of those groups do not see health, particularly for isolated, vulnerable elders, for people living in poverty, and for early childhood development from birth to those pre-teen years where they may become a truant and drop out of school or go into bad habits of drug abuse or some bad behavior, that we would mobilize a network in any community that wanted of all of you to sit down. Usually we ask the library, can we use their boardroom? And brainstorm what could we all do together with our creativity, our neutrality, our imagination, our verve, and our places that we could affect a public health outcome of a major client that's selected by a public health organization in that city. And to our pleasure, that this ability of saying that we're a social capital movement and that we can mobilize non-traditional resources that were not yet engaged to come to the fore has resulted in major funding from the Ford Foundation, from a number of hospitals, healthcare insurance firms, and a number of foundations. So we're now fully funded, working on public health, of which we know nothing about, but we're learning it very well, because we're taking your skills and saying, we can do something together if we can brainstorm. Let me give you an example. Columbia, South Carolina still flies the Confederate flag on their state capitol, but we won't hold that against them for this meeting. We went through the courtesy of a bank under their poverty funding into Columbia, South Carolina, and we were directed to meet with the librarian. The librarian said, Bob, I want to turn my library into a public health outreach center, and I want a public health nurse in every library. And we said, okay, that's good. We'll help you raise the money. She said, I want to give inoculations. I want to check on obesity. I want to arrange when schools are closed during the summer holidays and during the Christmas vacation, and low-income kids get their food when they go to school. I want to feed the children, but I need help in feeding the low-income kids in the library and in parks. Can you please organize your academic partners, your community partners, your design partners, your arts and cultural partners, the museums, to help me create a public health program led by the library, but in concert with every other resource you can mobilize in town. And with that, we've then got a demonstration grant. We went to another federal agency that supports museums and libraries. They said, this is fantastic. We went to a major foundation, the Ford Foundation. They said, we're on board. And I think my time's up. So, your time is not up, though, however. You have work to do. Thanks for hearing me.